So I'm Grace Stranch. I'm the CEO of Harpeth Conservancy. We're based in Tennessee. Our vision is clean water and healthy ecosystems for rivers in Tennessee, championed by those who live here. We do that through a blend of sound science, responsible policy, and strong community engagement. We've had a few really amazing policy wins this past year. One related to the Sackett decision that all of you have been hearing about. We were able to block legislation, and it was an exceptionally big win because no one thought we were going to be able to do it. We are one of the few states with heightened protections in the South. We also have the most aquatically biodiverse river, which we recently got put on the endangered rivers list with American Rivers. And a third major win we had was in stopping a rule regulation that would have allowed the proliferation of packaged plants in Tennessee. And so how we did these three things and how we're moving forward with the endangered rivers list, and we actually are seeing success on that right now too, we're making movement, is through a lot of state advocacy strategies. And so I wanted to give a few tips on state advocacy strategies that everyone can use regardless of what your makeup is of your state and your different communities. So the three things that I think are really important are research, collaboration, and communication. If you don't understand the makeup of your communities and you haven't done any power mapping, you don't really understand what you're working with. So one of the first things I recommend communities do is to take an inventory and do a power mapping of your communities related to river or whatever issue you're trying to tackle. Who are the influencers? This could be a wide range. It could be actual influencers on social media. It could be religious leaders. It could be nonprofit leaders, legislators, commissioners, but try to figure out who have a lot of people that they're working with and have power and influence. And then you want to understand how these systems work. So you want to look at your environmental agency on a state and federal level. How does zoning work? Do you have a special commission or do you have a board? How are those rules and regulations formed? And once you have that, your next step is what we usually say was then looking at how are those different people influenced? What connections do you have with them? And one of the things I would say is one of our favorite things is social media stalking. Look, do you have friends in common? That's the first place you should probably go. Talk to your friend and say, can you tell me about this legislator? Can you tell me about this commissioner? What do they like? Will you make a connection for me? Don't rework the wheel. Look at your similar organizations. If they already have connections, ask them, hey, I really don't understand how my state environmental agency works. Can you take me through it? Or better yet, set up a meeting with them. So many of these agencies love to talk about what they do, and they have a lot of public information campaigns. So it's a really good opportunity for you to start doing that relationship building, which is key to the collaboration aspect. And you want to research too, because if you're in a supermajority of one party versus the other, that might depend on who you send. So throughout all the research, I say make sure that you're aware of your privilege and the different people that you're putting forth, whether you're endangering someone or whether or not they might not be the best voice in the situation. You want to take into account all of that when you're doing this power mapping. And while you're doing this, really you should be interweaving all three of these different areas as you move forward with a different project or issue area. Make sure you're working out with different groups that are similar, but also different. So like I said, maybe you'll see, I was a former union attorney, labor lawyer. And so what I'll do is I might reach out to my groups and some of my connections that might not be who you traditionally think of and say, have y'all tackled this issue at all? Do you have any friends or connections? And you might find that in really interesting areas that you wouldn't have known before. So one of the things I like to say is just talk about what you're doing with your friends and community. You'll never know, A, you're educating them, and B, you'll never know what connections they have or what insights that they'll have that could really help you move the issue forward. And I think, building up those collaborations are so important because, a lack of resources. I mean, I know even power mapping takes a ton of time. So by sharing those resources and reaching out to different communities, you're kind of building up your own network so you're not doing all of the work yourself. And then communication. If your organization can afford a communications person, I think it is so worth investing in. Because at the end of the day, if you cannot effectively communicate your issue and educate people, it's going to be really hard to bring them along. And so you're going to need to understand, when do we use this media versus that media? When should we stay? There's certain issues that we worked on, the wetland issue, where we had certain groups that we said, please don't talk on this issue yet. This would actually really hurt our cause. And we're going to work with you behind the scenes, and maybe we'll do very targeted outreach. But if you did a public message, it would actually tank our campaign and would be more likely to pass in our state. And so we worked at that very strategically when certain groups spoke, when other groups spoke, when we sent a different person to a meeting versus me versus someone else versus it's a whole strategy. So having a communications person or really thinking intentionally about how you're bringing people into the conversation, I would say is key. And so I think if you work kind of blending in those three issues, you are more likely to have a successful campaign. But I'm always happy to talk further about any of these and more in depth. Just reach out.